research process? What's the first step? Is what? The research question, right? Then what? What's the next step? So after the research question, then what happens? We're going to get to that. That's going to be the 6 steps of the management research hierarchy. What about the research design? Once we decide on what the research questions are, what it is that we're trying to find out, then we need to design the research. So we're kind of taking it for granted. We've been talking a lot about focus groups and questionnaires. All of those are strategic decisions, whether or not we're going to do focus groups. And somebody needs to write the discussion guide. Because remember we said in a focus group we're going to have a moderator facilitating the discussion. Well, you need to have a discussion guide with all the questions that you plan on asking. And the questionnaire, remember we said that it's actually quite challenging to write a questionnaire. Because as a researcher, we need to write the questions and also the answers. And we already have to know what the potential responses are going to be and code those responses. So we need to know what are the most popular, or if not the most popular, but what are the main flavors of ice cream. And it's not just chocolate and strawberry and vanilla anymore. If you go to Cold Stone Creamery, you could get chocolate ice cream with chocolate chips, fudge, and brownies mixed all together in one. So we need to understand how appealing that's going to be to our target population. So that's something that ideally we've uncovered in our secondary research, and if we did primary research that was qualitative, we did focus groups, we would have had that discussion. And it is a unique experience. Think about it. So you go to Cold Stone and you customize your ice cream. They make the ice cream for you. You tell them, I want the strawberry ice cream, and then they add in the other items. You tell them you want it to have peanut butter chips. They put that. You tell them you want it to have strawberries. They put that. You tell them you want it to have cherries. They put that. And then they mix it up right there for you, right? And then they put it in a cup for you or in a cone. That's very different, for example, a very unique experience relative to Haagen-Dazs. Now I like Haagen-Dazs chocolate chip ice cream. But you know, the other day when I went in there and they asked me if I wanted some ice cream, I thought, well, I have a couple of cartons of this in my freezer already, and like, there's nothing unique about what you have in that freezer that I can't get at ShopRite or Pathmark, or what I have in my refrigerator, which is probably enough to stock a Pathmark or a ShopRite. So that's very unique then from Cold Stone Creamery or Maggie Moo's where they mix the flavor for you. It's a unique creation, not something that's already in the freezer there. But I digress. But so for our ice cream company, we might do that type of research to understand the popularity of flavors or the ability to customize your ice cream. So you don't have to just take we're talking about the difference between in business what we call make to stock versus make to order. So the products that, for example, they have at Haagen-Dazs are standardized. At Baskin-Robbins, it's standardized. But at Cold Stone Creamery, the base is standardized, but then you make your own flavor with all the different other ingredients. So we have the research question, designing the research, collecting the data, what else? We're talking about the research process here.
Preparation, collecting and preparation, is it the same?
Yeah, we could consider that the same. Collecting the data, collection and preparation,
Data analysis.
and data analysis. And then
Reporting
Results.
reporting the results. So ultimately, what we're expecting is that we're going to have information that's actionable. Isn't that the reason we're collecting this data?
Yeah.
Is so that we could transform the data into information. Information that's actionable. So that's information that's going to inform our business decisions. Because remember we said that we do research to manage the risk associated with making business decisions. So how do we decide what new flavor to introduce? How do we decide what features and benefits our new product should have?
Based on the result.
Based on the research, right? So it's critical that we do the research. And it's something that an organization has to invest in indefinitely. Some companies think that, oh, they do it, we did research this year, and then that's it. It's ongoing. You have to continue to do research. Because you have to monitor trends and the shifts in the needs and wants of your customer. And your level of brand awareness and the perceptions as it relates to your brand and the attitudes about your brand. Those things change over time. And we want to change it. We want to influence those things. We want to influence the perceptions of our brand and the attitudes that people have about our brand. So how do we know if we're achieving the desired perception? Because there's an actual perception of our brand and a desired perception. That's something that we need to measure. What's next? Okay, we talked about sources. We said that, usually as it relates to secondary sources, we might have some hesitation. Even though it's relatively inexpensive, we said that there's some issues, right, Bassell, about the accuracy, about whether or not it's still relevant, whether or not it's become outdated. What else? The competition has access to the same studies. So we said we need to think about the source, these research reports, whether they're descriptive or explanatory or predictive or reporting studies that are accessible, and there's a lot of them that are accessible, that we could just, for example, download at our desk. He said sometimes they're free. Sometimes they're $500. Sometimes they're $5,000. But it's not proprietary. It's not primary research. It's not research that we initiated. It's not confidential. So some factors, some source factors that we need to consider are these 5. Purpose, scope, authority, audience, and format. So what is that? How does the purpose play into a factor that we're going to use to evaluate a source? So when we download a research report, we should think about the purpose. What was the purpose of doing this research and making it available? Is there some hidden agenda for this research? Questions? So again, we're talking about factors that we use to evaluate sources. The other things we mentioned are relevant. Now we're talking specifically about these 5 factors. So we download that research report. We need to ask ourselves, what was the purpose of this research? And decide whether or not that's an issue. It may not be an issue. Maybe it's fine. Maybe the purpose is completely legitimate. The scope. What is the scope? Why is that significant? Why do we need to look at the scope? What does that tell us? Good, Echo? When it was published? By who? And what else? What about how detailed the study is? So we feel that, okay, the purpose is legitimate. The reason for publishing this study, making it available, the reason for them conducting that study is genuine. They want to try and understand the market dynamics. But then in terms of the scope, we need to evaluate the breadth of the study. And is the breadth of the study enough to cover the area that we have of interest? So the topic that we want to study, is the scope broad enough to include that? So maybe not. Maybe the breadth of the study is narrow. And it's not going to provide any insight into the topic that we want to study. It could be because of when it was conducted or where it was conducted. So maybe it only studied a particular market. So sometimes we want to study a particular market. We might want to study, for example, New York City or Philadelphia or Chicago. But if our interest is in rolling out our product nationwide, then that would be a limitation. If the scope of the study was just in Chicago, right? It was just focused in Chicago. What about the authority? So the publishers of these studies, do they have any credentials? Who are these people? Is it a well-known market research firm? Is this study an example of primary research or secondary research? Who is the author of the report? Is it an industry expert that published the report? Is it a senior partner at a consulting firm? And then we should also consider the audience. Who was this report intended for? Was it intended for high school students, for college students, for business people, for industry experts, who did they expect was going to read this report? That's of significance to us. Because we need to ask ourselves, were we the intended audience? Is this for us? Or is this a research report that was created as a sample for students? Question? So you see why the audience is significant? Why we need to evaluate that? Who was the audience for this report? Is it for business people? Is it for the United Nations? Is it for Congress? Is it for consumers? Is it for the consumer? Is the audience for this report the consumer, the user of the product? So we'd expect that the nature of the information would be different if it's for the consumer versus somebody in marketing. Wouldn't you agree? And what about the format? So we should also look at the format of the study when we're evaluating different sources. So does this report have an executive summary? So in business, you need to have an executive summary. Your report might be 100 pages, but there needs to be an executive summary that's a couple of pages that summarizes the key points. Questions? Any questions? So those are 5 factors we could look at. There's others, but certainly these are 5 factors that we've discussed in a prior assignment, right? Does that look familiar to anybody?
Yeah.
All right. Let's talk about the 6 steps. What are they? Does that jog anybody's memory? The management dilemma. So that could be either a problem or an opportunity. The management dilemma. What is the issue? What are the symptoms that causes management to be concerned? What would be an example of a symptom in business? What do you think?
Decreased sales, maybe?
So sales are going down. Anybody concerned about that?
Yes, because of profit.
So sales are going down is a symptom of a problem. What the problem is may not be readily apparent. So why are sales going down? Why, right? Want to try to answer that question? Why? Who, what, when, where, why, how? So sales are going down. You better make sure that you know why sales are going down. So that's part of the management dilemma. What's next? What's the management question?
This is reassessing about like everything.
How about we focus?
So what's the difference between the management question and the management dilemma?
This is just
What
making
management
a like
can do to deal
cushion
with the
form.
problem?
Is that question we have to ask to answer to the dilemma?
Right.
So everybody heard what Josie said? So the management dilemma is the problem or opportunity. And the management question is,
The restatement form of dilemma or opportunity. I mean problem or opportunity.
and
The question
It's the question that we have to answer for the management dilemma.
Yeah, so what is the question? So the question, what is the issue that needs to be resolved? How could they solve this problem? How could they keep sales from going down further? How could they get sales to increase again? What about step 3?
research question.
How is the research question different from the management question?
This is basically objective of the research.
Yeah, the objective of the research. So specifically, the objective of the research. So the management dilemma, we says the problem opportunity is a symptom of a problem.
Or it could be
The management question is,
the restatement of the dilemma, like why is it going to happen?
and then the research question is specifically,
The objective.
yeah, what it is that we're going to study.
Sorry, right.
And then the 4th step,
And the specifications.
what's the investigative question?
The representation of information
And,
and why is
so it's the information what? Specifically what type of information is it?
like research question, answer information, like looking for the answer of research question
Why? Why do we need the answer?
because we need to solve the problem.
Yeah, so the investigative question is the information that the management team
We
needs
need to answer the question.
to solve the problem. What do they need to know to select the best alternative? And so the measurement questions are
Collecting data, actually.
the specific questions that we ask when we're collecting the data. So we know what information we need, but then we have to get down to like, okay, so what questions actually are we going to ask on the survey? Those are the measurement questions. What specific questions are we going to ask? How much do you like ice cream? Is that the question? Or are there other questions that we're going to ask? And then the 6th step is,
Management decision.
so what are the recommendations? So based on the research, not just based on our opinion, based on the research, based on our data analysis, what is the recommendation? How is management going to solve this problem? Or how are they going to leverage this opportunity? Are they going to introduce a new product? Are they going to introduce a new advertising campaign? Maybe there's a problem with the perception of the brand. We could reposition our brand in the marketplace. That's something that we could do through marketing communications. What's the difference between an exploratory study and a formal study? So the formal study follows the exploratory study, right? You remember that? The formal study actually begins where the exploration leaves off. That's in chapter 6. What are some of the applications of qualitative research? We started a few minutes ago, we said job analysis. Advertising concept development. So when you develop an advertisement, let's say when you develop a commercial, you need to test that. So you need to have focus groups to show people your commercial or your print ad and get their feedback. When we see some of these commercials or print ads, you wonder whether or not they did this type of research, this advertising concept development. It makes a lot of sense to spend the money to do this type of research because it costs a lot more to buy the time to air the commercial. And depending on the nature of the commercial, it could easily cost millions of dollars to produce. What else? What are some other examples of qualitative research? New product development we talked about. Remember we said we're going to have these concept boards. We're going to have a concept statement. Now, for the first time ever, right? Retail design. It's a good way, it's a good example of qualitative research. You probably take for granted the flow, for example, when you go into a store. You ever notice you walk into a store and you walk down one aisle, you want to go left, but no, it keeps you going to the right? Why? Because first you pass the pants, then it leads you to the shirts, and then it leads you to the socks. That's called retail flow. And if you go to IKEA, they have a retail flow that's certainly very deliberate. In fact, I can't find my way out of there. And I think that that's part of their retail design. So we talked about focus groups. We talked about quantitative research. What about the different types of non-probability sampling? So one example of non-probability sampling would be snowball sampling. So what's a snowball sample? Is when you get participants based on referral. So you get one participant to refer another participant. So they refer to that as a snowball sample, that you gain some momentum by one person who drinks orange juice refers another person who also drinks orange juice, who then refers another person who also drinks orange juice. Orange juice, it has very similar benefits to milk. So we said that you could argue that they are not indirect competitors, that some marketers would consider orange juice companies and dairy farmers to be direct competitors, because orange juice has now calcium and vitamin A and vitamin D, all features and benefits that were once attributed exclusively to milk. And we said Got Milk, the Got Milk campaign is an indication that they do see competition being elsewhere other than amongst the dairy farmers, because the Got Milk campaign was a group of dairy farmers that came together to launch an advertising campaign to increase the overall consumption of milk. So it wasn't about brands. They weren't trying to create selective demand for a particular brand. They were trying to create category need. They were trying to increase the consumption of milk. Because they saw orange juice, for example, as being a direct competitor. They were more concerned about people drinking more orange juice than they were about other dairy farmers. So snowball sampling is when one participant refers another participant who refers another participant. So that's referred to as a snowball sample. Versus a convenience sample is anybody that's available to participate. A convenience sample is when anybody that's available participates.
So how effective is that convenience sampling?
Yeah, so in terms of, you would argue that you don't have a representative random sample. But ideally we have the demographic information where we could analyze the differences in preferences, for example, based on the information that we did collect, but it's not a representative random sample. It could still be insightful, but yeah, we need to be aware that that there could be some issues there. When we do research, how do you guys feel about observation? So, one type of research is observation. So we're not asking people to fill out a survey, right? We're not asking them to fill out that questionnaire. We're observing. We're observing them. Are there any issues there?
They might not like to be observed.
Right. They may not like the idea that they're being observed. And so then that raises that ethical issue about whether or not they're entitled to know that we're observing them. Is it okay? How do you guys feel about that? Is it okay that you're observed, you go into a store, and market researchers are observing you? They want to see you pick up the product off the shelf, and whether you read the back panel of the package, whether you open it to smell the fragrance of the shampoo. What do you think? Are you guys okay with that? That somebody could be watching? Somebody could be watching.
Big brother always watching.
Yeah, they have cameras, they watch it anyway.
They already have it. I don't know.
As long as it's not inside of your house.
What's an advantage of observation, that type of research versus a survey?
I think it's easier.
Is it easier?
Less time for
No.
Some way.
You don't need to go like on a scheduled time.
You do if you want to observe in person.
Oh, you can record it and you can do it in your hall actually.
Oh, so observation. So you could record it.
Yeah.
So you don't necessarily need to be there.
What do you think right now? You can go home and see it.
Yeah.
If you're doing a questionnaire, people can put in false information, and if you're doing an actual observation, you get the actual data.
You saw them do it,
See it.
right? It's not that they said they would do it, or they said they read the packaging, or they say that they don't open the shampoo. You saw them open it. Why'd you say, no, I never do that?
You might see something else.
That's right. That's right. Right? You might observe something that's beyond the scope of your research.
But it's confusing too.
It's true.
Because nobody knows nobody's mind.
Anything else? Any other advantage?
Yeah, but you actually the information that you collect from observation actually occurs at that present moment. Like with the survey, you're asking and then some time passes and maybe his opinion changes or behavior changes, but observation it's the present moment.
So you would see that as an advantage.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's not based on somebody's recollection of what happened. It's you observed him, and it happened at that particular moment. Fun times! Fun times! You guys are amazing.
Yes.
Yes. Fantabulous!